Welcome, friends and subscribers. I hope you're somewhere cozy and warm to join us Fireside here for Venoge's second edition of the live stream. I'm excited about tonight's guest because I have a lot to learn in this department. So without further ado, let's take it Fireside to Mrs. Weaver and our guest.
Thank you, Mrs. Lapenna. And
You're
I know
welcome.
You're going to man the chat. You're going to take care of all that for answer all the questions, forward them to us. But first, I'd like to introduce a short video about this sweet evening's guest. Amy Liebert, for those who know her, needs only a short introduction. However, the scope of her work requires more. A native of California, she moved to Louisville, Kentucky in 2013. Holding a bachelor's and a master's degree in history, she also teaches it. Her historical costuming work ranges from the 18 teens to the reign of Queen Victoria. Amy and her husband Brian Cushing have portrayed Jacob and Charlotte Weaver for Musée de Venoge since 2018. The Weavers were the builders of the Venoge cottage. Her last appearance for us was in our video August Afternoon, which debuted last December. She and Brian also star in our series Juleps, Songs, and Jacob's Punch.
Jacob, you came back. How many times did you vote? Did you get elected?
No. But I got nominated real good.
Oh, so these are the citizen soldiers I have heard so much about. These are the men, they fight for the love of the country, to defend hearth and home, their wives, their children.
And if they don't, they'll get fined.
Oh, so why are you not out there?
In 2021, she and Brian launched their Victorian Barroom YouTube channel. There you can learn to drink like a Victorian. For the series, she serves as videographer and perhaps a taste tester. Let's find out by welcoming Amy Liebert. Welcome, Amy. So glad to see you this evening on a snowy night. So glad you made it from Louisville, or the Grange.
Was Louisville originally. Thank you so much, Mrs. Weaver. I'm so glad to be here. Brian and I just enjoyed watching the first Fireside stream so much, and I immediately reached out and said, "Oh my gosh, can I be on one, soon?" And you said, "Yes, yes, yes, yes. Get in the car, come."
Absolutely. We'll save the date. Absolutely. But I know that you and Brian are going to be releasing a new video.
Well, we have put out a lot of short videos on our YouTube channel, the Victorian Barroom, in the last couple of years. But during that time, Brian has been working really hard on something much longer, a full-length documentary. And it's been a long journey, but we are so excited. That is going to be premiering March 1st on the Victorian Barroom YouTube channel. This has been a partnership, especially with Alan Bishop, who is the head distiller at Spirits of French Lick, who you can also find at the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute on YouTube. Alan, he calls himself an alchemist. We might call him a distiller, but he's an alchemist, he's a historian, and he dug into the history of absinthe here in Switzerland County.
Who knew?
Who knew? He said he was going to be the first Hoosier to make absinthe. And it turned out that he was going to be a little late by about 200 years.
Yeah.
But that set off this incredible journey that he and Brian went on, working on with Musée de Venoge, on some of the history here in Switzerland County, along with the Switzerland County Historical Society, working with some of the botanicals that were actually grown here in the Venoge garden.
Right.
Then they did the first part of the distilling with at the Small Farm Distillery at Historic Locust Grove in Louisville. And then the final steps of the distillation were actually done with Kentucky Artisan Distillery, where now our friend Ben Eves works. So everything's come back around full circle, really. But anyways, this was, if that seemed dizzying, it was. It's this incredible project uncovering the story of absinthe that was being made here in Switzerland County in the 1830s by the Swiss immigrants, and going on this really neat journey that I got to be, behind the scenes for some of, at Spirits of French Lick, at Kentucky Artisan, at Locust Grove, at Venoge in the garden here, which all culminated in a tasting right here in this very room.
And what I like best about it is the locals called it pond water.
Yes.
I like that term.
I like that very much. I love getting to actually also hear Martha up at the Historical Society give. She's interviewed on the documentary as well. And I learned so much about Switzerland County just listening to her talk. So I was supposed to come on here today actually so that we could hype up the special private preview that's happening here at Venoge on Sunday.
Yes.
But it's sold out.
Too late, too late.
Yeah, so people are just going to have to wait until March 1st to see it on YouTube.
Yeah. But we're expecting a crowd of early viewers, and we'll have the whole house set up and be tasting also.
Yes. And Alan's going to be there, and
Good.
there's no one who knows more about
Oh, no,
absinthe.
he can just go on and on. I don't understand all that he says, but I enjoy hearing it.
Oh, yes, yes. I mean, he's this hands-on taught person who then will just spew the chemistry.
Yeah, it's chemistry.
Yeah,
Yes.
and these terms that I'm like, I have a master's degree, and that's still a very large word,
Yeah.
Alan.
Yeah, when they were here, they built a temporary still out
Yeah.
on a patio there, and it worked. So it was
Yeah.
very nice to see a still set up sort of ad hoc. It was
Yeah.
very nice.
Oh, yeah. And it's such an interesting story, too, I think, about how people come to a new place, but they replicate what they're used to with what is available in that place.
And now what can we do with what we're growing, and how to sell it?
Oh, yeah.
But you have something over here that
Yes.
you're going to talk about.
So I am here, for anyone who missed it, from the Victorian Barroom YouTube channel. The Victorian Barroom is a channel that my husband, Brian Cushing, dreamt up during COVID when we were sitting home, and that we've been running together for the last, he would say 3 years, I say 2 years. I'm going by the calendar. So we make, as you
Just
might...
seems like 3 years.
Yes, well, because there was basically a year in production before that. He built the bar in our basement and then promptly cracked 2 ribs, so we couldn't get it back up the stairs for several months. But anyways, we make 19th century beverages, 19th century mixed beverages. Normally those are adult beverages, but our most...
Like this.
Like this.
Whiskey punch.
Yes, and I think we have that recipe on the Juleps
Yeah.
Songs and Jacob's Punch, which is a series we did on the Musée de Venoge channel.
Yeah, this was the election day drink, as I recall.
Yes, so if you'd like to taste what Mrs. Weaver is drinking, you can head right on over to the Musée de Venoge YouTube, a regular, the Juleps Songs and Jacob's Punch playlist. This January, on the absolute last day we could post a dry January video, we also tried to put up one for what was at that time called temperance drink. But today these are coming into vogue as what people are calling mocktails. So that was our last recipe, was a mocktail. And since it is snowing outside and I'm going to be driving
Really
home
snowing.
in the snow and the dark, I thought, Donna said, well, can you come on and make a recipe? I said, I'm going to go with the temperance drink tonight. So I'm going to make what is called Orgeat lemonade. There were a lot of temperance drinks, or what we might call mocktails, in the bartending manuals of that time. And a lot of them were actually takes on lemonade. And some of them were things that were so familiar to us today still that we wouldn't probably even make a video about them, like strawberry lemonade, raspberry lemonade, which I love. But one that was a little fancier and that we thought still kind of gave you the ritual and the experience of getting a cocktail was one with Orgeat lemonade. So Orgeat syrup is an almond-based syrup.
Oh, I didn't know that. And I see it's nearly empty.
It is. Well, quality control.
Yes, I understand you're the taste tester.
I am. I'm here to help. I do taste testing for all of the cocktails.
Okay.
We didn't make this syrup. We got it from Liber Company. And one of the things that we try to do on the Victorian Barroom is, even though we might be introducing some ingredients that are a little less well known, we do try to introduce things you can get today. And part of what we do on our channel is try to say, yes, you can order this from this company, Liber Company. They're also a great place to get real grenadine.
Oh.
Yeah. So to make this drink, what we need is our Orgeat syrup. We need lemons and whatever fruit we have in season. We also need water. Is the one thing I realized I didn't get handy. Is there water anywhere in the house?
We do have water.
Excellent.
I can get you water. What do you want me to put it in?
Anything that makes you comfortable.
Oh.
Come
Oh,
to
that's
your
a
live
challenge.
stream.
I will come back with water. You wait
Thank
here.
you. So what we need first of all is an ounce of this Orgeat syrup. 1 ounce is 2 tablespoons. So if you don't have any specialty barroom equipment at home, you can always remember that. If you have a set of measuring spoons, you actually do have bar equipment. There we go. And that's the base of this drink. Pour it in my shaker. After that, we need the ounce of half a lemon. And it's actually a little bit easier to do that if you cut that lemon up into chunks ahead of time.
Mrs. Willard says, a true soft drink.
Yes, exactly. She's absolutely right. In fact, the term soft drink at that time could just refer to anything that was not a hard drink. Thank you, Mrs. Willard.
Yes.
Usually I do the lemon in just quarters, but this was a big half I gave myself. So, and the nice thing is, since I'm going to be straining this through a cocktail shaker, I don't have to worry about seeds or anything like that. And let's see, when we practiced this, we were going to actually
How much water do you want?
up to the top there.
All the way to the top?
The Jerry Thomas recipe said just as much water as you like, and we tested that, and about 2 ounces was good. So I've got the syrup, I've got juice of half a lemon. I should have had some ice, but I didn't want to try to get ice in here by the fire tonight.
We have snow.
Yeah, I could run out and get some snow, so you can also add ice, but I'm keeping it kind of simple for our live stream tonight. Strain into our glass.
That's a nice color.
It's such a nice color,
It
and
looks opaque.
it does, and the shaking it actually gets it nice and creamy.
Right.
If I'd used the ice, it would be even creamier. Which, by the way, people always often sort of ask us incredulously, but how did they get ice? Did they have ice? They can't really have had ice. My friend, walk down to the river in winter. I give you ice.
And stored in straw.
Yes. Now, since it is winter, this recipe comes from 1862 from Jerry Thomas's Bartender's Manual. And one thing that's very different about these recipes compared to how we like things done today is when it comes to the garnish, they're usually a lot less specific. And they usually just say what's in season. Because they didn't live in a world where you could just imagine that you'd get whatever you wanted.
So what's in season now?
I'm going with preserved cherries.
Okay.
All right, now theirs might not have been quite as candy apple red, but my husband and I did have the opportunity to visit the Steamboat Arabia Museum a couple years ago, which sank just about, I think, 6 years before this drink was written down.
Right.
And part of what they pulled out of the Arabia wreck was tons of preserved cherries.
Yeah, that's a fantastic wreck if you ever want to go research there. Fantastic stuff.
Yeah, that
not
museum.
Not one, not two, but dozens of things.
Dozens of things.
Toast.
To Venoge. Well, that's delightful.
But I see that you brought a few other things with you.
Well, I did. Part of what you and I noticed last time in the chat was a lot of people were really interested in the clothing at the time. And so when we were talking about what to do for this live stream, we thought, well, obviously we want to talk about the documentary. We want to talk about, make a cocktail, that kind of thing.
And a mention of the fire.
Absolutely.
Quick
Yeah.
question
Real
before
fire.
you go on with the wardrobe.
Please.
They're asking where can you buy the
The Orgeat syrup?
yes, Orgeat.
Online from Liber Company. Yeah, great question. So we just order from them online, and they've got a bunch of great syrups, like I said. So me personally, if I'm ordering online, I usually order 2 or 3 things to make shipping feel worthwhile. You can check out some of the other great stuff they've got. They've got lovely cocktail syrups. Especially I would check out, they've got real grenadine, not the cheapy syrupy stuff, but actually has from pomegranates.
We can put a reference to that in our description under the video.
And as Mrs. Weaver pointed out, we went through this one pretty quickly, so
Yes, you did.
if I had it to do again, I'd have ordered 2. Yeah, Liber Company, online, very easy to find. And since it's just ingredients, not alcohol, you're not running into weird shipping things. Yeah.
Doesn't cross state boundaries.
It's just flavoring, so it's fine. So we were talking about how we wanted to answer a lot of the questions people had last time about clothing. And so a lot of times I do historical clothing demonstrations where I will talk very much historically. I'll usually do the either getting dressed or undressed thing, and we think we're going to do that in a little while here. But we thought for this, based on the kind of questions that people had, maybe we could also just talk about it from a living history perspective, from a reenactor perspective, about if people are interested in learning about these things, getting started with this kind of thing, both in how we learned about it and researched it, or also how we store this stuff, take care of it, preserve it. Yeah.
So how did you get interested in living history in 3 seconds or more?
3 seconds or less was I started in 2003 at the Great Dickens Christmas Fair in San Francisco.
Okay.
Which is this marvelous indoor Christmas Carol come to life type thing. And I had been a theater major before I decided to pursue the big bucks and become a history major. So I was involved in theater, and I just found out about this thing. I walked through the doors the year before. One day, it was my first exposure to living history. I look around, I go, oh my gosh, I'm home, I want to be here, I want to do this. And so I auditioned. They had an audition process, which I think is a wonderful way to get people involved. I really do. Because if you tell people, oh, you can come whenever.
No.
Whenever means never.
Yes.
But having a process of like, come to this place at this time.
We're picking you.
Yeah, aren't you excited? You get to give up every weekend for the next 6 weeks. Learn how to make historical clothing.
Willingly, and you will enjoy it.
And I did. Oh my God, my life began in some ways. Which is really interesting because I turned 40 a little while ago, and so I realized I've passed the tipping point of this is more than half my life.
You don't know that.
Well,
I'm positive. I'm sorry.
I could get hit on the way home.
That's true.
No, whatever happens next. I was 19 when I started, and I'm 40 now.
Okay.
So this has been
Half your life.
Yeah, more than half my life now is living history.
Yeah. Well, you live it well.
Thank you. Thank you. And periodically I will share. I've got a picture of my first year doing Dickens Fair of the outfit that I was wearing because it's very bad, Donna.
It's embarrassing.
It's not embarrassing because I know how hard I worked on it and where I was headed.
And your sympathies and your motive.
And I like to periodically pop it on my Instagram and stuff to point out
Reminder.
how far I know I've come in terms of clothing construction, and we all start somewhere. And the 19-year-old in that simplicity pattern that's been discontinued.
With a zipper?
No zipper. No zipper.
Okay.
There was no zipper.
You get a point for that.
It was made out of quilter's cotton. It was from a simplicity, what I realize now is fantasy pattern that no longer is published.
For good reason.
And I basically learned to sew in order to make that bodice by hanging out at my friend Jessamie's house and just begging her mom to teach me to sew. And I got it done, and I had the most magical experience of my life, just being there for those weeks, and I never left.
And now you've evolved into something that's not a costume, really.
Yeah, and I've
It's
really
not a
spent
costume.
years since then really learning how to make clothing. And I don't try to get hung up when people have fights about call it a costume or call it clothing. I'm not here for the drama, but I've really been able to, over time, get into the mentality of let's research every layer, every piece. How did this functionally work? When it was really everyday clothing, which I've really enjoyed. It's become something that's really, really interesting to me.
Yeah, you've worn this as Charlotte many times.
Yeah, I wanted to wear this tonight because to me this has become my Charlotte dress. So if you want to tell people.
Charlotte and Jacob Weaver were the first residents and builders of the Venoge cottage. So and Amy is the face of Charlotte, and Brian is the face of Jacob. and that's what we present to the public. And this is your Charlotte dress then.
And I didn't make it to be a Charlotte dress, but it's become my Charlotte dress in my mind. It's my go-to Charlotte dress. And I think partly because when we started some of that process, we still weren't as aware how late into the 1820s Charlotte and Jacob did move into the cottage.
No, 28.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, this could pass for 28.
It could. It absolutely could. Yeah, it could still be. I mean, probably around by 24, 25. The sleeves aren't quite huge yet, but Charlotte would have kept her clothes, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is my Charlotte outfit. Do we want to we stop and ask for questions or comments?
None at this point, but a lot of comments. Let's see, let me go back here. Someone wanted to know what brand is it Orgeat? Orgeat, thank you.
I think we've answered that one, yeah.
I thought you did, and then
Library company.
you're going to also put it in the.
Yeah, we'll put it in the description.
Thank you.
So we were going to talk about research, and we were also just going to do some undressing.
You're going to undress. I'm staying calm.
Well, it's a beautiful dress, Mrs. Weaver, so you should keep it on.
This is closer to 35, 36.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, why don't I go ahead and pull off my apron, because I've already done
You're
my...
going to stand up, correct?
I am, and we could talk a little bit more, first of all, about the differences between the years we're portraying.
And what's your apron called?
Oh, Lord. Apron.
Pinner?
Pinner.
It's more of a pinner.
Yeah. I made this one out of the Workwoman's Guide, which admittedly was a few years later, and you can notice I actually had it pinned to lower the bodice length on it because it was made for the 40s.
We have a copy of the Workwoman's Guide right here. Indispensable if you're going to be doing sewing for this period.
Utterly indispensable. I made this one out of some of the instructions for that, and it will have a name. Everything in there has a particular name, and I don't remember anymore. So by the 1840s, the bodice length was longer, which is why to wear it for the 20s, I just sort of tucked it up a little.
The nice thing about it has a pocket, and you'll find them with pockets, and that's great.
Oh.
You will, yeah. It's indispensable for an apron. You've got to have a pocket. I particularly made that one to be the size just a little bit bigger than my cell phone. But yeah, there's this whole myth that, oh, women didn't have pockets in the past. What? Yes, they did. And when you make your own clothes, let me tell you what, you make sure there's pockets.
Absolutely.
Uriah's wife, who by the way, she loves your Charlotte dress pattern.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, that's a good place to start, actually, talking about the pattern on the dress. So I'm orienting this way now, yes? All right.
Well, yeah, you're correct.
Thank you. So one of the things that starts happening in America in the 1820s is that the Industrial Revolution takes off in textile production. The first factory opens in 1815, and by the 1820s, it's rolling, literally, actually. And you start getting these roller prints. So whereas 10 years earlier, you did have prints, but they were usually much more simple in their motif, like one little image that's just repeating. Now you can start to have these more intricate designs where one motif is layered over another. And this one's still pretty simple in color, but they could even get really increasingly complicated. And in fact, this beautiful 1830s print that Mrs. Weaver is wearing is a great example. So it's always very funny to me when people think the past was black and white and everybody was so drab. And no, by this time, there was more fabric available, more people were able to afford it, and more people were able to afford more clothes. And you see it start to reflect in the design of the clothing as well, that starts to take up more fabric. So this is about a common mid-1820s style. You can see the sleeves are getting sort of full. They're not nearly as full as they will be. By 1830, they look kind of like...
And you're not wearing a sleeve puff under there at all?
No, I'm not.
Nothing at all?
It's not big enough to need it yet. For a couple of years, between like 28 and 30, they do this like big thing. I always think they look like linebackers. And then they start doing much more what Mrs. Weaver has going on by the 30s of like, well, let's bring it in on the bottom and then accentuate this puff.
And I've got a puff underneath.
Yeah, that's stuffed.
And
That's
Mr. Longsworth wants to know if Mrs. Weaver made her dress.
I did. I enjoy sewing a lot.
It's
so.
a beautiful dress.
Yeah, I have fun.
I really like that one. And you can sort of see the evolution from if this is a few years earlier than that, probably about 10 years earlier. What happened was the top got fuller and then people brought it in. And you see that from the 20s to the 30s as people keep playing with where to put the fullness in the sleeve and moving it around and just sort of tweaking it every few years. And then by the early 1840s, they're over it and the sleeves just get perfectly like nice and straight.
And every layer of society, as I understand it, is paying attention to the fashion drawings.
Oh, yes.
The quality of the fabric may change, but the style and the look, you want to be there.
I'm always especially interested in that with the waistline. With working clothes, sometimes they're different garments, but the waistline, wherever it was, women were always rushing to put that where was fashionable. So especially if you think about the Regency period or the Federal period being about 10 years before this, it didn't, at that time, that waistline was a bust line. And it didn't matter if you're looking at the Dairymaid or the Queen of England, they were wearing the same thing. Well, actually, court clothes hold back a little bit, but
Yeah, well,
not in court dress, but
court dress always seemed a little bit behind the times.
it actually is on purpose. Yeah, it is. So that's a bad example there, but whether you're looking at a Dairymaid or a Duchess, let's put it that way,
Yeah.
it didn't matter because everybody wants to look nice.
Oh, yes.
Cinda Carpenter says, thank you for dispelling the drab colors of the past. By the 1830s, the colors are vibrant.
Yeah.
And everyone's
Correct.
loving it.
Yeah, and we also have from Rolling Pastures Farm, did the ladies of the period, I just lost that, always wear head coverings?
No, that's a great comment. Did they always wear head coverings? Absolutely not. So what you see is that through the 18th century, caps are almost universal, almost ubiquitous. I add an almost because it's human behavior, and somebody will find an exception, but ubiquitous. What starts to happen in the early 19th century is that caps become an option. And thank you, Rolling Farm, because this is actually a thing of mine that was a pet peeve when I started doing the Federal period about 10 years ago. Maybe it's been dispelled since then. But when I started doing that, there was a weird idea going around that caps were sort of this thing that happened when you were married and old and didn't care what you looked like anymore. And that's just really wrong on a lot of levels. By the early 1800s, you see plenty of very fashionable women in fashion portraits, in paintings, in watercolors, genre art, all up and down the social scale with bare heads. You also see caps in fashion plates.
Oh, yes.
They're-
And in portraits.
And in portraits, and in watercolors, and
Yes, yeah.
it was an option in that time. And some of them were like this. This is a beautiful one that Lynn McMasters made. And she sells the pattern, by the way, for this, out of a Portrait Patterns. They would be really frilly and beautiful, some of them. And so it could be this beautiful accessory, because who doesn't want a lot of lovely frilly lace around them? And then others would be very just sort of plain and meant to me. I'm working hard. I need something to absorb my sweat. I don't have time to do my hair.
More or less utilitarian.
That's the word I was fishing for.
They're great for a bad hair day.
Yes.
Because
Well-
I have those sometimes.
I was going to save this for the last, but I'm going to tell you something right now. I've done something very period today, which is that I am wearing my hair. It's mine. I keep it in a box on my dresser. All right? I paid for it. I styled it. It's mine. Sometimes when I do these time periods and I have lots of time, I will skip the cap and do the whole beautiful, elaborate thing. Usually I'm still mixing hair pieces in my own hair. But oh my gosh, is it easier with a cap?
Oh, yes. Absolutely. You think this
Yeah.
is real? No.
But it's blended so perfectly with your natural hair. I love
Yeah,
it.
it's the same color. Yeah, yes, we're lucky.
The
Have you ever
Victor-
seen ads in newspapers for
Oh, yeah.
Because I've looked and I haven't found them.
So I haven't seen them in this period for newspapers. Later in the century, I see them in catalogs. Catalogs
okay.
sold hair pieces once catalogs got big. But I've seen museum pieces. There's a really famous one that has a beautiful coral diadem with curls attached. And in the collections over at Historic Locust Grove from, I believe, the 1830s, there's an actual example from one of the daughters, once she grew up, who's complaining, I believe, to her sister about how her little daughter thought it was the funniest thing in the world. And you can imagine a cute little kid to run up to all the fancy society ladies, and they go, "Oh, sweet child, let me poke you up." And she'd go, "Whoop," because she thought it was funny as heck to see if those curls were attached to their head or not. And here's this cute little cherub laughing, like, hee, while this society woman, they were in DC, is like aghast
Oh, yes.
that this child.
Shocking.
So I've seen physical, examples. I've seen written documentation. You know, just like today, a lot more people, I think, are wearing wigs than we realize to keep those beautiful blowouts and beach waves and whatever.
Well, then there's all the gossip I've heard about Dolly Madison.
Oh, was she?
She lost her hair because of the mercury. She used mercury.
I'm not surprised at all. I
And
believe
that's
it.
why she continued wearing a turban.
Well, I'll tell you
when
what,
it was
it's very
waves.
warm in here.
It is.
So I was going to leave that for last, but hey. And now I will admit from a reenactor standpoint, and this is part of what we want to talk about tonight, is I am not using period correct fake hair. I'm using fake hair from ye old Amazon that I curled. And there we are. And it's that easy
Herself revealed.
to do that part. It's wonderful.
They want, Uriah wants to know about the footwear of the time. Are
That
we
might be
talking
easier once
footwear?
I've sat down again.
Okay, we can
Shoes.
hold on to that
Yeah.
until then.
Um,
And also, Victorian Barroom is, I don't know if he's questioning this, but everyone perpetually stayed with the style of their youth, right?
Sometimes.
is that the Victorian Barroom just wrote that?
Yes.
That is my husband pointing out that most people did not perpetually stay with the style of their youth. Clothes, you have to remember, wear out. They've got to be replaced, even working clothes. The clothes that get kept and preserved forever are often really special things like christening gowns, wedding gowns that aren't just worn again and again. And there's just tons and tons of examples of people, of portraits of older folks who look very up to date. And who have moved on because as they had to keep getting new clothes made, their tailors and seamstresses made the new things, or they made them themselves. So that is my darling man being glib.
And Noah Henner says,
Oh, hi, Noah.
Yeah, hiya, strangers, looking sharp as always. Stay warm out there.
Oh, Noah Heiner was actually one of the interpreters we worked with at Locust Grove for a long time. Yeah, from the time he was 14 and now he's
Oh,
all
wow.
grown up and 25.
And everybody's laughing at Curl Snapper.
Oh my gosh, this feels so much nicer next to this fireside. But I'm here to tell you,
It's very warm here.
it might be a modern polyurethane plastic Amazon headpiece that I changed. I adapted it. But what I'm doing is period and spirit. A lot of fake curls at the time. It's a lot of work to do this, and if you want a really easy way to do period hair, tap, go. And this is one that I got a topper off Amazon and curled it. And I should really recurl it. It's looking a little ratty, but
It's fine.
thank you. All right, we were going to also then, if you were going to help me, start looking at some of the layers underneath these clothes.
Would you like some assistance?
I would. Would you assist me, Mrs.
We
Weaver?
can do that. And what are we doing here, Mrs.?
We're going to take this dress off and see what's supporting it.
Ooh,
So by this time, a lot of interesting things are happening in fashion for women.
your dress is very warm.
It is. I've been in front of a fire. Thank you, ma'am. I'll just stop and look at this a little bit and then peel it off. The waistline, if you think about the Jane Austen period, with that very high waistline, I always say this time, the 1820s, is like somebody took a Regency dress and remembered how the human body actually works. So, thank you. I'll take that for a second. You've got, the waistline is slowly beginning to drop back to something near a waist. And what you see is the actual line is dropping. And then in the 20s, you tended to have this very big, wide waistband to accentuate that. So this is almost just touching my natural waist, which I spent years wearing a lot of 18 teens dresses that are elaborately constructed
Up and over.
to have this impossibly high false silhouette. And once I started wearing 1820s, I thought, oh my gosh, it's so comfortable. This is how the human body actually works.
Yeah, the constant in all this from one fashion period to the other is that there's all the same body underneath.
Yes.
And how you adorn it and dress it, that's the changes.
I think that's a great way to put that, Donna. And if you, something that's really interesting to me about this is this dress, the bodice pieces are still basically the same pieces from a Federal or Regency bodice. They've just been made longer and they've been made wider. In the front, it's been cut wider and then gathered back in.
I have a drop front over here if you want to see it.
Yeah. So this is 1820s, mid-20s. And because you have more fabric now, it's easier. You've cut this bodice very wide and then you've gathered it in, so you're getting this fuller front. Fastens in the back, nice and easy. The skirt itself, the pieces are still cut in the same basic way the 18 teens were. It's just that you've got more gores in there and they're a little wider. So again, really similar concept, more fabric. If you look back at this about 1810, 1812.
Yeah. Drop front, apron front.
This is something that's gone by the way by then, is you used to have this neat little do-it-yourself apron front. But how high that was.
Yeah, it's right under here.
It's right there. And at the time, that was, the new revolutionary thing.
And the fullness in the back.
Yes, all of that fullness. And that's something that keeps going with the teens as well, and then the 20s. But you see much less fabric in the sleeves, much less in the skirt. But by the 20s, people are playing with all this new fabric they've got, and you've got, again, really similar idea, just more fabric. The sleeves are getting huger. Those don't look the same anymore. Under that, I've got, let's see, next, this chemisette, and these could either be closed or sometimes open, especially if you had some jewelry you wanted to show off. A lot of those lovely crosses and things they were showing off at that time.
Or some coral.
Yes, coral was extremely popular at that time. So you could open it up to sort of show that off if you wanted and have, it's almost sort of also a fashion throwback, because in some ways there's these little elements of the Elizabethan period that pop back up in the Federal period, and then sort of some of that hangs on to the 20s. It's very interesting. It's like a very different, reworked idea of an Elizabethan ruff come back around again.
Sure, yeah.
And there's a few little subtle things in that
A
period.
lot simpler than a ruff, though.
Much simpler. Yes. Shout out to Noel Gilaham if he's watching, who figured out how to recreate those. This guy, and I'm feeling so much nicer in front of our Fireside chat.
Wait a minute, we've got...
Oh, and we've got a mic because we are using modern 21st century technology to come to you today.
And we'll just attach this onto here, and I'll hold this.
Thanks.
You're tethered.
Donna's got me. I can't go anywhere.
I love the way your petticoat is essentially with a strap on it. I love totally functional.
And you can do this two different ways. There were some that had a whole extra bodice attached, and then there were others that were just straps. What I really want to talk about with this petticoat, though, is you can see, since the skirts are getting wider, they're getting to a point where they need to be held out, where you need more structure underneath to try to actually have it all not just falling in. You want it held out. You're starting to get this bell. And that's a trend that will keep going through the 1860s.
The silhouette's going to change again.
And you can see the proto-Victorian. You can see how it's starting, which Victoria herself was born in 1819. So even though she's not on the throne yet, you can see the pieces of the Victorian period. It's starting to become a bell. The silhouette is turning into, we're accentuating the waist again. We're having the skirt come out.
And 1840s, it gets even more so.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let me take this off briefly. Go up and over.
There was so much discussion about how we were going to do this, and I'm not sure any of it really panned out in the end.
No, not
but
at all.
You
Not
can
at
drop
all.
that down my stays.
Not at all. You have a flashing blue light back here.
Well,
madam.
what do they say? Planning is everything.
Do they say that?
Something about planning is
Wait a-
futile, but planning is everything.
I'm going to attach this onto a lace. Okay.
But what you're starting to see here is that's happening a little bit in the 20s, and way more so by what Donna is wearing and Mrs. Lapenna is wearing, is that you're starting to get this cording worked into the petticoat. And it's an early thing, but if you imagine big hoop skirt in the 1850s and early 1860s, that's where this heads eventually. This is way before that. You don't have the steel or anything like that. This is working with cording. This is working with fabric, with fiber. And also by then, you're starting to see, not all of them, but some of them are getting made out of cotton instead of linen.
And cotton used to be expensive, but now it's not.
The Industrial Revolution makes cotton king.
Yeah.
And you start to see it first. I think you see it sooner, the farther away from your body the layer is. Because the closer it is to your body, the more people kept wanting to use linen because it breathes better.
Cinda Carpenter says, beautiful cording on the petticoat.
You all, Cinda knows so much more about this, more than I will ever forget, Cinda knows. And so I was sitting here thinking, oh my gosh, am I saying this right? I'm sure Cinda can correct me in the chat. So if Cinda says it looks beautiful, I am truly touched. Thank you. Again, since I'm trying to give advice on how to do this at home, I will tell you, zipper foot on my sewing machine. Zipper feet are great. And I did not use a pattern to make this one. I just decided how wide I wanted it to be at the bottom, gathered it at the top, and tried to leave it smooth in the front.
So you probably just answered Laura Williard's question. How is the petticoat corded?
In this case, some delightful macrame cord from Ye Old Michael's craft store. This is probably actually a little big. I've learned since then. At the time, it might have been narrower stuff that they were using. But yes, from a modern construction perspective,
This is crazy.
your zipper foot is your friend.
Yeah, right.
And if
So if you
Cinda said
stretch
it looks
this
good,
out, this would actually be probably about that long.
oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah, easy.
Well, and I'll tell you another tip because I'm not mathematically minded. When I make petticoats, either corded ones for this time period or in the 18 teens, they had tucks. They weren't doing all the cording yet, but they still wanted a little fullness. I cut them off at the top if I need to. I do the math in terms of I overthink it, and I do it all on the bottom, and then I fit it on the top. If I need to wax them off the top, I do that. And I start by hemming the bottom and start adding everything else in.
It's logical to me.
And it's just easier for me that way.
I even like the idea of whacking it off at the top.
Yep.
Quoting you.
I'm sure there are some really, is it right brain or left brain people can do the math? I don't even know which side of the brain. I'm sure there's some who can do it. I think I approximated it. I got to use pi in real life, but, for the most part, I adjust on the top. Is it okay if I chuck some of this off?
Want me to put it over here?
Oh, great, yeah.
And Uriah said they received a new Singer sewing machine for Christmas, and they're definitely going to make the baby a tiny dress.
Oh, wonderful.
Oh my gosh. Actually, depending on your time period, the Workwoman's Guide has some wonderful
Yes,
children's
absolutely.
clothes. Yeah, will you hold that up again, Mrs. Weaver?
Oh, yes. Workwoman's Guide, indispensable. Lots of pages, lots of illustrations. You measure by nails. Get over it.
Yeah. And you're talking to someone with no children of her own who's made a lot of children's clothes out of the Workwoman's Guide because it's fun and they're so much smaller than our clothing. It's like a nice little project.
And
Yeah.
Amy, your husband's just on top of it. He had recommended that, and he had typed it before you as you guys were mentioning it. So that's funny. Thank you, Brian.
Hi, honey.
Oh, we can even do cribs. So there's even a page on
Wow.
cribs. So that's decent.
The Workwoman's Guide is amazing. A nail is what, 2 1/4 inches?
I don't know.
Once you get used to thinking in those terms, yeah, and I have to check it every time. But in fact, so for the rest of the stuff that I'm wearing, I'm not going to take this off, but I'll talk about it.
Amy.
I don't think you're going for that kind of audience, Donna.
No, we're not.
The stays that I'm wearing, these were starting to change. And the terms corset and stays do seem to overlap in this time period, actually. I think a lot of us who do living history get very used to saying stays early on because we know that people, when they think of a corset, think of like 1890s, and we're trying to explain that this is not that. But actually the term corset I do see pop up quite a lot. The corset is starting to change. I got this one from Red Threaded, and I love that company so much for a lot of reasons. And one of them is because Cynthia, who runs the company, understands the subtlety of what is happening at this time. That it is not an 1850s corset, it is not an 1890s corset. It's still working very much off the concepts from the 18 teens, but it's just starting to have, like, there's an extra panel in there. And I know it's bouncing too much light, you can't see that.
No, it's all bleached out.
And by the way, ladies, Erica Harrington says,
Hi, Erica.
yeah, she says that a nail is 2 1/4 inches.
So you were
Thank you.
correct.
Thank you,
She
Erica.
got it from the Workwoman's Guide. She said it's amazing.
Got like my people in the
I
chat here
know.
backing me up. This is great. you still do have the same concept that you had in the teens of you've got the busk down the front that's providing a lot of, and I'll never get that back on now that I'm, until I take the corset off. Cannot forget this. That is providing some of the support, but you are starting to see a little more boning come in. It's a very transitional period where it's not the constrictive corset you're thinking of at the end of the century. And even those were not tight-laced the way people think they were.
No, that's propaganda.
No. I always liken that to, listen, there's somebody today walking around in shoes that are painfully tall that is not good for her.
Right.
But most of us aren't.
No, we are not. Absolutely.
Or there were times in my life that did I ever wear 4-inch heels? Maybe for some pictures. But every day of my life, no.
This is true confessions.
A little bit.
Okay.
But so there's a lot of this at first glance looks really similar to an 18 teens corset is what I'm getting at. Oh, in fact, I had brought one to sort of show off. I won't reach everything now that I meant to. Oh, here we go. This is one that I made to be more like the teens. This was one that I was very lucky. I got to go to a hands-on workshop with Burnley and Trowbridge a few years ago. And they had us do this off of an original in the Williamsburg collection that it's just 3 pieces. 1 in the front, 2 in the back, plus the gores that are worked in for the bust. Made at home, fitted on the body. We got into pairs and fit them on each other. It was great. And then this has no boning in it.
That's very simple.
It's very simple. It's cording, and most of the stitching you see is decorative. It's got some cording down the back just to keep it nice and straight. So in the teens, what you saw was occasionally you'd see some boning down the back just to keep everything nice and tidy back there. Through the 20s, it's still pretty simple, but by the end of that decade, you start to just see some extra pieces. You start to see a little bit of boning coming in, just a little bit. And maybe that's one of those things that's just exciting to me, that subtlety. But because you know where fashion goes.
And the whole object of this is the silhouette. To
Yes.
create that silhouette, that perfect silhouette.
And the dress itself still isn't cut in a way that really constricting your waist would even have any obvious advantage. But you're right, it's without the underbit, you cannot get that silhouette. You're starting to just have a little more structure here. You're starting to have the petticoats that can hold the skirts out a little bit. And it's getting to the point where you cannot get that silhouette otherwise.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we all crave that silhouette.
Oh, yes. Yes. Today we do it with Instagram filters and things like this, but
Yeah.
they had a corset and petticoats. I am also wearing drawers, which I made from the Workwoman's Guide. The Workwoman's Guide is from the 1840s. There were drawers throughout the century. It's just such an easy thing to work with the Workwoman's Guide. I made them off of that. I've got a blog post up about that on my blog. But what I'll just tell you is I looked at the instructions in the Workwoman's Guide and I realized that they were designed for somebody a little smaller than myself. But the great thing about the Workwoman's Guide is that it's not a tailoring manual. It's not really math heavy. It's based on most effectively using fabric sizes. So it's pretty much just able to imagine the next basic up fabric size and kind of take it from there and add that much back in.
Yeah.
Cut the waistband to fit me.
Yeah.
And it worked great.
Yeah. My next bonnet's going to come out of that one.
Once you get into reading it, it's such a great resource, and it becomes, you got to get into its mentality like anything else. But it's really easy to work with. It's really great.
Uriah said they just bought the Workwoman's Guide.
Oh, great.
There you
Wonderful.
go. So I look forward to seeing those baby clothes.
Yeah, you got to tag us.
Now, this is one of my favorites. I've always liked the fabric in
Oh,
this.
thank you. And this is a wrapper. This one is actually from your time period. This is from the 1830s. And I brought this with me to sit by the fireside and hang out and chat with Mrs. Weaver.
And stay toasty warm.
Yes. Oh, and where's my microphone end up?
I don't know. Let's hunt. Here we are. Okay.
There we are.
Is now a good time to talk about the shoes? Uriah had
yes.
that question about the footwear earlier.
I'm trying to think how to delicately get any of that on camera.
You have to lift a foot.
That might be difficult. The shoes at this time were very thin in the sole for what we're used to today. And so there was actually a book published somewhere around this time called Every Woman Her Own Shoemaker.
Oh yes, I have that one.
Yeah, what year was that from? Do you remember?
I thought it was 40s.
Yeah,
I thought it was later.
You can. I got these from Logsdon and Company and dyed them. Really sort of flat-soled, which I never used to understand the story of the 12 Dancing Princesses when I was a kid.
Oh, with the P.
Yeah,
Yes.
well, there's the 12 Dancing Princesses that every night they go out somewhere dancing and they wear out their shoes.
Okay, that's a different story.
Their father knows they've left the palace because their shoes are completely worn out in the morning. And when I was a child in the 1980s and 90s, I thought, how on earth would you wear out a pair of shoes in a night? And then I learned about historic footwear, and especially the dancing slippers, which were really kind of just like our ballet slippers today.
Yeah, very thin.
When ballet slippers come out of that tradition, I thought, oh, that's how.
Would you like to sit down again?
Yes, I would.
And we do have a guest who says, thanks for reminding folks of the need for the proper foundational garments.
Absolutely.
That's Cinda.
Cinda's on top of it.
She is.
And really, if we've gotten anything wrong, listen to Cinda in the chat. She will get us right.
Yes, yes,
And
sir.
Mrs. Williard says, love vintage wrapper.
Oh, thank
Me
you.
too. Me too.
Yeah, it looks nice.
Yeah, I love this one. I made this one from the Period Impressions pattern, and I'm trying to name patterns to give people resources. Every single person I know who's made this wrapper from the Period Impressions pattern has had the back piece come out 6 inches too long. I don't know why. Just whack it off. You're fine.
Your term, whack it off?
Yeah, that's,
Back to whack it off.
make it fit.
Yeah. Okay. What else can we discuss from the period?
Oh, goodness. Well, I know we both apparently thought alike and had the same thought about some of the really foundational books people should have in their
Yeah.
library if they wanted to do this.
Yeah, I've got a couple more.
Oh,
I-
so I have to say this. Uriah said, oops, ladies, I didn't think about that. Sorry about the shoes. But you covered the topic. That was great.
We have these two, which are interesting, useful.
Yeah, so there's a lot of information out there, but if you really wanted to get into this, there's a few books you should really, really have on your shelf to begin with.
Basic stitches.
Basic Stitches, and remind me, were these republished by Canucks Corner?
I think so.
Yeah, these were some that Canucks Corner republished. The Workman's Guide and the Ladies' Guide to Plain Sewing. I think they're still available on the Canucks Corner website.
Oh, we also have some hats, if we wanted to talk about the hat styles. And this is Canucks Corner pattern.
Ah.
That's Kathleen's.
Early century stuff, Canucks Corner is just a fantastic pattern company you all should look into. So through the teens, I'm not sure if they go into the 20s or not.
I don't think so. And then we have this, which is Lydia Fast.
And I've still got a little Orgeat Syrup on my hands, so
Oh,
I'm going to hand you
okay.
back your
All right.
lovely silks.
Yeah, we won't be touching that.
I
But
think
this
it's
is-
mostly come off, but I'm terrified of.
This is an 1805 hat made by Lydia Fast, and it's completely hand done. Beautiful work on the inside. Beautiful, it's just lovely. I get to wear it sometimes.
It's a beautiful piece.
Going back to the shoes for 1 second, Mrs. Williard said that she heard that they sanded the dance floors. Not sure if that's true, but that would certainly cause some thin-soled shoes to wear out.
Well, I don't know about that, but I know that that's still done in ballet today, or at least it's not sand. It's what's it called? You use the same thing when you're playing pool.
Chalk?
No, anybody who's danced knows what I mean. And again, I think the dancing slippers we use today just for dancing slippers really date back to this time, so I wouldn't be surprised if there was something like that.
Yeah, feel all better now?
I do. If we're talking about hats, one thing I didn't have on, because we were inside, was a bonnet. By the 1820s, you get to have this sort of wide brimness going on that I just love. That sort of big bit, big bows, lots of feathers. This one came from Timely Tresses as a blank that I decorated. So if you're interested in getting started with these things, I would always recommend any time period you start, your first bonnet, I would say get straw, because we tend to do these things in really hot environments. And so my philosophy is always when I start doing a time period, I get a straw. And then if I keep going, I might end up with a lovely silk like you just showed. Timely Tresses has great straw blanks, and then you can decorate them.
You could also start with buckram and make your own.
You could do that.
Yeah, that's a challenge, however.
You usually end up covering that with silk too, though.
Yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Or some other. Yeah, I guess mostly silk.
Yeah. There are some cold weather events. We have a lovely Christmas event here at Venoge, but you generally go, a lot of times if you do living history, you end up in like a large,
very warm,
open, airless plain in July for some reason.
I think we pretty well covered everything.
All right.
And we've uncovered a few things, and we've covered a few things. So thank you all very much for joining us for our second Fireside stream. We'll be doing another one next month, I believe, with somebody you all know. So thank you very much, and good night.